So where should we start? I thought maybe we could just start with a definition of
Oh,
like, how do you've used this word discernment, like,
right.
how do you define discernment?
Part of why I I used to have a little gift for folks called the 21 Days of Discernment. And
Mhm.
then I realized that nobody knew what I was talking about.
Uh-huh. Well, we use this
And
word discernment, right? We use it,
yeah, I use
we
the
use
word
it kind of
discernment a
casually.
lot, but
Yeah.
like there were lots of people who had no idea what that meant in the context that I meant. For me, discernment, and really I mean formal discernment, right, is a process with,
Like with high heels on, or
yes, high heels and lots of bright lipstick. It's a formal process that has different possible skills that you can use, steps, places to begin, places to end, and it's all in the service of making good decisions so that your life has more spaciousness
Mhm.
and that your life has a sense of direction and meaning and fulfillment because you have gotten in touch with the deepest desires of your own heart and sort of ordered your life according to them.
Yeah.
So
So,
that deepest desires of your heart thing,
yeah.
Ignatius of Loyola, Saint Ignatius, is the one who said, "The will of God is written in the deepest desires of our hearts."
Hmm.
So he was kind of an intense person, right? He founded the Jesuits,
Uh-huh.
and and his
Never argue with
that
a Jesuit.
yeah, you're gonna lose. Um, and the thing is that people, when they start to think about that, it's kind of a radical idea, right? That
Right.
what we really most want is actually for our highest good. It's most in alignment, but most of us don't know what we really want. So we
Right.
start there.
And the deepest desires of our hearts, which to me
Exactly.
suggests that there's kind of layers of desire,
Mhm,
right? And
mm,
so there's our like
yeah.
day to day, I would really love to eat that Three Musketeers bar, or, I'm cranky about this thing and I just want some downtime, or and then there's
Hmm.
like layers of desire beneath
Hmm.
that. And it is also radical, I think, in a in a spiritual realm, to honor desire,
Yes.
because a lot of spiritual traditions, or at least how we've understood them in the West, seem to we have this Puritan drive, like we
Hmm.
judge desires, right? and
Right.
and we're not allowed to have desires or act on our desires. But this idea that if you keep following that Ariadne thread down, that you'll find
Hmm.
something deeply
Well, that's
true and
why.
meaningful.
That's why. Mary Oliver, may her memory be for a blessing. It was so radical when she said, "You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves."
Yeah.
Like, what does the soft animal of your body, which is you, what do you love? And can you allow yourself to actively love that
Yeah.
you love?
And why is it so hard to know what that is? Because isn't that such the problem, is that we don't even know what we love a lot of the times. And why
Mhm.
is that? And is that part of this discernment process that you guide people through?
Well, I think for different people, it's different reasons,
I hear
right?
typology.
Some, like for example,
Cool.
um,
We should have like the red flashing, like Enneagram Geek Out warning.
Enneagram coming. Some people, just to speak generally,
Yeah.
some people are more introspective than others,
Mhm.
right? And there are some people who are very introspective and can see that as an unrelieved strength, that it is one of their superpowers, and it is one of their superpowers, but they can also get lost in it and just kind of perseverate and go over and over and over and over the same thing.
Right, right.
And so for those people, discernment that is really concrete and that involves other people is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people like, for example, I am an Enneagram Type 6, and one of our habits can be to poll people. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Because
Which is not to say that anyone who does that is necessarily a type 6.
right, absolutely.
Right.
Or, or, and just as, anybody who's perseverating is necessarily a given type. But one of the things that I do and that is consistent with sixness is polling. And so really, really, really slowing down the process so that I or the person in question need to listen and attend and do practices and processes that get me in touch with those deep, deep places in my own heart and my own mind and my own belly.
So you're not just
To do that.
asking someone else's opinion on should I take option A, B, or C. That's not what they're there for. You can have a discernment process with someone else, but it might be them reflecting to you and guiding you back to your own deepest desires in
Right.
your heart, right?
Yes. Yes. Other people are going to be helpful or harmful to us along the way because we live with other people. But in discernment, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest ways that other people are helpful to someone who's in discernment is in the process of confirmation. Like once you have made a decision and lived into it, how do the people you trust and the people you admire respond to your decision?
So give me an example
Right.
of what you're talking about here.
So, a good example of this would be when I decided to leave the convent. I lived for a while with the Sisters of St. Joseph, and they are close to the Jesuits in their practice. So it's not there's a lot to say about them and discernment and the Jesuits, but I decided that actually becoming a religious sister was not the life for me. But it took me a while, and I did a process of discernment to figure that out. And then everybody who was close to me went, oh, thank goodness. There were sisters who said they were sad to see me leave the community because they loved me and we had gotten really close. But the people who knew me well and who had my best interest at heart said, but I understand. I understand why you can't stay.
So
And
that's an
so that was
example of
really
you.
confirming.
Yeah. So did you go through a discernment process to arrive at that place? And did
Mm-hmm.
you do the 60 like polling thing?
I
Or
didn't.
like
I
how did
didn't
it work?
actually do the polling thing,
Mm-hmm.
fascinatingly enough, partly because I was living in the context. It's sort of ironic, right? The sisters gave me the tools of discernment they were the first people I knew who talked about discernment. They're also the first people I knew who talked about the Enneagram, interestingly enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, I learned about the Enneagram from them.
Interesting.
Um, but so I did go into a process of discernment and I spent, a month or so really trying to think things through. And then I took 3 days and 3 nights and I wrote a lot and I did, I prayed for interior freedom, which is a characteristic of the willingness to be surprised. Right? It's a willingness to be surprised, a willingness to find a way where you think there is no way. And I didn't know what I was going to do if I left was my problem. And having prayed for holy indifference, right? The idea that whatever is given to you that is for your highest good and most aligned self is the way to go, even if it's not what you expected. And interior freedom, which is the willingness to be surprised. And suddenly I knew that I needed to move in with Julie, who eventually I married. And but at the time I just knew that she would be a welcoming landing place, and luckily she agreed. But so that was a confirmation, right? Like I had this idea, oh, I could move in with you, and she said, that's a great idea. You know?
But it sounds so there's like this big question,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then there's like the hard work and the drudging and the 3 days and 3 nights, and maybe even all of the process leading up to that 3 days and 3 nights, and the journaling and then there's this flash of clarity.
That's how it was for me on that decision, and it's not always that way, of course.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And a lot of times the answer is, don't just do something, stay there. Right? Like sometimes the answer is wait. And sometimes the answer, so to speak, is that you need to refine your question.
Yeah, that's one thing I was looking at on the program page for your program, making hard decisions.
Making hard choices.
Making hard choices. Okay, I did have it right. That a lot of it is refining the questions themselves, and I thought that was so interesting and wanted to hear.
Well, I learned that from my students. I learned that from the people who took the course when I have offered it before. And it was they who showed me, like, we only have a month, right? A month is not a long time when you're trying to figure something out and you're learning the techniques for the first time. It's difficult, right? You're not necessarily going to get to, yay, I'm done. But you gather up the tools in that time to learn what your question really is. And then for some folks, after they left the course, they did have that big aha moment. Someone just wrote about how she had been trying to decide, should I do this kind of ministry, or retire? And she recently wrote to me and said, let me give you my update. I chose to go back into congregational ministry as a minister. And this is why I love it, and this is why it was the right thing to do, and I totally didn't expect it. And it's been wonderful, and I'm so glad, that I slowed down, because in her case, she was a kind of person who wants to rush, who wants to get there right away. And she said, actually, at the beginning of our work together, I'm not very good at this quiet, introspective, reflective stuff. So I made sure we did a lot.
Yeah. Well, it can be uncomfortable, right? It can be uncomfortable to be in the not knowing.
Yes.
We can want to rush out of that.
Yes.
Just checking my battery here. It went down really fast. Yeah. So I was curious to hear if, like, do some people just know how to make really good decisions already? Do you think that there are some types of people, whether it's Enneagram types or just very well-adjusted people, like, who have an easier time being decisive and making really good decisions than other people? Or do you, what do you see with people and their habits around making decisions when they haven't learned a process like discernment?
my bias, right, is towards the question of skillfulness, right? That some people are more skilled than others at making life-giving decisions. And I think people who are living full, wholehearted, healthy, self and other caring lives are likely to be people who are making good decisions for themselves. We have to love ourselves, but not only ourselves, and love others, but not only others. And I think that's a really important place to be when you're making decisions, because our decisions do affect other people.
Sure. So it's kind of learn to make good and skillful decisions for your own sake, but also for the sake of those around you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I
So
think I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I just want to say this one thing. I think there is a lot of individualism, and I don't mean individuality. I mean individualism, right? The prioritizing of the individual. We talk about how you have to have self-care, and you have to think of yourself first, and you have to do what is good for you, no matter how it affects other people. And I don't think that's a mark of health and fullness, because we live in an interconnected web of existence, right? We live in an interdependent way, whether we choose to acknowledge that or not. It is simply a fact that we live in interdependence.
Right, and we can't ignore that. And self-care and all of that focus on the individual can be necessary,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to take into account the other side of the polarity there. It's both.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why it's interdependence, right? It's about this dynamic process that's always happening. And that everything we have, I mean, this is maybe a tangent, but everything we have has come from somewhere, right? We didn't spring out of the nothingness and whole and complete. And we have gifts that we've received from every relationship that has ever touched us, and every relationship that has ever touched the people with whom we've been in relationship, outward into infinity. Soil microbes and black holes affect our lives. So
Thank you
that's
for
really central to my theology.
that.
And in terms of discernment, people can get lost on one side or the other, right? It's especially hard, I think, often for people who are feminine of center to be caught up in what they should do for other people, and what they need to do for other people, and who they should be for other people. Not all the time, obviously, but we don't do ourselves any favors if we ignore our own well-being either. But you can't tell a mother you have no responsibilities to your children, right? Or a father either, for that matter.
Right. It's not just about self-care anymore, and it can't be, and it never will be. And
exactly.
Right. Yeah. So what are do you see common patterns in people trying to make good decisions, skillful decisions? Do you see like common pitfalls like that? Like, are there other common ones?
Well, we've talked about rushing.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to rush to a decision.
And in the
trying to
space of not knowing, let me get out of it as quickly as
let me get
possible.
out of it as quickly as possible. Well, and also people who feel better after they've made a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And so they want to make a decision because they know they'll feel better,
Even if it
whether it's the
wasn't
right, even if it
right.
wasn't the right decision. Just having made the decision will,
Mm-hmm.
make them feel better. On the flip side, you have people who feel better when the maximum number of options are open,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
right? And they want to have all their options open all the time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so they never want to reach a decision.
Because narrowing it
And
down
it's,
feels like limitation, which feels like constriction.
yeah,
And
right,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
exactly.
So
Um,
possibly an Enneagram 7 type would lean into that.
might have that kind of um, and desire for novelty
Mm-hmm.
too is something that some people have, is that
Mm-hmm.
they want something new all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas again, other people are very change averse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Similarly, I mean, another pitfall is that um, we live in a noisy world. We live in a psychically noisy world. And hearing or attending to our own deep, deep selves takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't think we have that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We believe that taking the time to make a good decision can be a waste of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I don't have time to like make lists and do breathing exercises and ask what my body wants. And,
Mm-hmm.
I just need to do something, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not always the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like what you're saying is, one, we do, we do owe it to ourselves and our decisions and those around us to make the time to more skillfully discern and make better decisions. But two, that it's worth it unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not just, oh, you'll make better decisions after this, like
That's
this
right.
process itself is worth it on its own.
Oh my gosh, yes. There is a saying with the Sisters of St. Joseph that's a pun, and it is, let discernment be your habit.
Uh, wow. Yeah.
Right? So let discernment be your habit, which speaks directly to a life of discernment,
Mm-hmm.
right? A life of wisdom, a life of good judgment, a life of clear seeing, metaphorically speaking. A life of wisdom. I mean, that's what I want most in the world, practically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe after love. But I'm with Solomon. I pick wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And making discernment a habit, very punny, making it a habit, because when you pause to think about it, I don't know if you've done, I'm sure you have, but I paused once in writing to think about just how many decisions we make in a day, and it's dizzying. We are just nonstop decision making machines, and whether
mhm.
we pause to really slow down and make a body-based felt sense, attuned
That's a
decision,
decision, right?
right, or not, right, that's a
Mhm.
decision, and it's just decision after decision. And so um the examples that we've talked about so far around discernment have been about big life-changing decisions. Should I stay in a religious order or leave, and should I make this big career change or not? But it seems like this is a practice, it's a habit that
Mhm.
is also about the smaller decisions. Is that what you found with your community members?
I think it becomes about the smaller decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually easier to learn formal discernment when you're talking about really big, really significant life decisions. And then you notice along the way, oh, I'm applying these
Mm-hmm.
principles to my smaller decisions. You know, should I go to coffee with this friend I've scheduled to go to coffee with on Friday? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a huge decision, but discernment is very helpful in making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I use that example because I just had to do it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And you didn't poll.
And I didn't poll,
You
it's
didn't
true.
poll.
I didn't poll.